Fascism, a political philosophy or movement that exalts nationalism and race above the individual and requires a centralized, authoritarian government headed by a dictator. Fascism necessitates severe industrial and social regulation and forcible suppression of resistance. Fascism originated as a counter-revolutionary movement, shielding society from communist-inspired revolts, and instead emphasized discipline and nationalism. Today's fascism manifests itself in a society without the threat of major political revolutions. Instead, various other anxieties such as xenophobia and economic uncertainty are jumbled together and are radically exaggerated to project an image of a monolithic threat that a fascist movement can prevent. Fascist regimes distribute propaganda and use symbolism frequently, which is clearly evident in how fascist leaders are often perceived as nearly superhuman, despite their often subpar looks. Fascists also need a group of people or movement to blame their country's troubles on. For example, the Nazi Party blamed Jews for Germany's financial instability, while Mussolini targeted socialists.
Several factors must be perceived by supporters in order for a fascist movement to succeed. 1. The belief that one's group has been taken advantage of, which justifies any behavior against the group's enemies. 2. A strong sense of community or brotherhood. This brotherhood's unity and purity are forged by common conviction, if possible, or by exclusionary violence if necessary. 3. Individual self-esteem is tied up in the grandeur of this group. I call this an enhanced sense of identity and belonging. For example, the march in Charlottesville this past summer. 4. A clear figurehead for the movement, such as Hitler or Franco. And 5. The idea that for some reason, one's group is naturally or rightfully superior to another, which also provides a scapegoat for violent and aggressive action against that group.
Fascism shares qualities with many other political systems, but has many extreme differences as well.
Fascism is best political system. Only one person in charge. No one else to mess it up.
No, a government run by the people is the way to go. When one person's in charge, they hold unlimited power. We have to voice the opinions of the people.
We must be united under a nationalist banner. And of course, the blue eyes and the blonde hair.
Niet, niet, niet. Communism allows the proletariat to seize the means of production from the bourgeoisie, which is why it is the best. Products and materials shall be shared so that everyone can benefit, unlike other systems run by capitalist pigs.
Socialism is the perfect compromise between capitalism and communism. It allows for social programs to benefit everyone instead of taking away all of the private property owned by the government, like communism.
Communism is an economic system in which all property is owned by the government and fairly distributed without a need for money or a government as we see it today. Both communism and fascism need a strong government, but the two systems use that government for different purposes. Communism only needs government to establish the new economic system and to moderate the workforce, while fascism needs an authoritarian state to continually control people and maintain order. In a fascist government, a certain class of people make every decision and are considered to be better than the other classes. In a democracy, all people have an equal say in government, which is made by and for the citizens. In addition, most democracies have multiple major political parties, while fascism necessitates an authoritarian one-party state. One of fascism's purported goals was autarky, or national self-sufficiency. In the 1920s and 30s, fascist leaders pitched this as an effective middle ground between bourgeoisie, profit-oriented capitalism, and revolutionary communism that would dismantle many social institutions and persecute the bourgeoisie. Fascists sought to exert complete control over industry, ideally to ensure maximum efficiency and to root out corruption, but in practice resulted in more money for the government elite and more corruption. In Germany and Italy, fascist government cartels determined many aspects of commerce, finance, agriculture, and manufacturing, and made decisions according to what would further the state's power.
Charlottesville, Virginia, home of two of our nation's founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe, and one of the 25 best romantic getaways in the U.S. Come visit Monticello, Jefferson's home, or our famous outdoor mall. Charlottesville is also home to numerous historical statues. Our Lewis Clark and Sacagawea Monument, erected in 1919, still stands today. In addition, our Robert E. Lee statue commemorates American racist history. Despite the recent controversy of this summer, Charlottesville remains firmly against violence. Our new law prohibiting living in your mother's basement and playing Call of Duty has finally stamped out white supremacy in Charlottesville. Local gun control laws have been strengthened to prevent people from shooting never mind. However, our local Walmarts have stopped carrying tiki torches, and we look forward to welcoming you to our great city.
What were the origins of fascism? Before the first Orange president, Lil Uzi Vert, Rick and Morty, the space race, and Hitler's rise to power. Early influences that shaped the ideology of fascism date back to ancient Greece. The political culture of the ancient Greek city-state Sparta emphasized militarism and racial purity under the leader Lycurgus. His society was admired by 20th century fascist leaders. The idea of fascism was created during the genesis of the 20th century, or the fin de siècle era. Several philosophies were refined and mixed together to create a new movement. A concept called social Darwinism, which asserted that groups of people and individuals were subject to the same type of natural selection Darwin discovered, was a key predecessor to fascism. It was used to justify nationalism and racism. According to social Darwinists, each nation or race had to compete to survive. Another philosopher named Arthur de Gobineau created the concept of a master or superior race and how white people were better by nature than other races. An Italian elitist named Gaetano Moscow claimed that a perennial minority ruling class existed and that it occurred in every society. The French author Charles Maurras founded an intensely nationalistic movement that supported a strong monarch. Georges Sorel, a Marxist philosopher who validated violence in service of political gain, also claimed that the Bolshevik Revolution demonstrated the power of myth. After a failed strike in 1910, Sorel renounced leftism and joined Maurras's movement. The fusion of Maurrasism with Sorelianism and many other aforementioned philosophers influenced early Italian fascists and set the stage for the world wars.
In Italy, the Italian Socialist Party opposed the World War, and as a result, many left the political movement. A young editor at a socialist newspaper, Benito Mussolini, left the socialists and joined a new nationalist faction. His new faction was shunned by the government and socialist parties. It prevented his fascist movement from meeting. The idea of fascism also began to spread in Germany. The National Socialist movement was in its infancy at this time. Fascists viewed World War I as a major shift in world politics in which all citizens participated in their country's military effort. So as a result, according to the fascists, a mass mobilization was necessary to prevent their country, Italy, from losing to other countries in this new contest for dominance. I like watching people in their sleep.
In 1919, two prominent Italian fascists created a manifesto that recognized several key points. 1. Proportional representation. Similar to the U.S. House of Representatives, the number was proportional to the population. 2. Councils of experts that would control industry. This allowed fascists to maintain control over the private sector. 3. Universal suffrage, granting everyone the right to vote. 4. Abolition of the Senate. 5. Workers' rights, a minimum wage and more bargaining power for labor unions. 6. Higher taxes on the rich and lower taxes on the poor, a progressive tax system. Mussolini led his fascist party to ally with other far-right movements in order to destroy the Italian Socialist Party. At the time, many workers were on strike, and Mussolini took advantage of the situation to violently oppress revolts by claiming to preserve law and order. However, the fascist party was forced to alter its views to make it more palatable to mainstream conservatives. Sound familiar? The Fascist Party abandoned its anti-clerical slant in favor of the Roman Catholic Church's support, endorsed the monarchy, and cracked down on women's rights. For example, they wanted to criminalize birth control. This new acceptance of more mainstream values caused fascism to explode. By 1921, the movement had over 250,000 members. Fascists began to occupy entire cities, promoted Italianization of historically German areas, and attacked socialist and Catholic labor unions and other organizations. In 1922, fascists seized Neapolitan government buildings in a show of force known as the March on Rome. In order to prevent bloodshed and appease the fascists, King Victor Emmanuel III selected Mussolini as prime minister. Mussolini proclaimed himself dictator of Italy and later made himself answerable only to the king. The fascist main breakthrough manifested itself in the Acerbo Law, which allowed a party that received at least 25% of the vote to hold numerous parliamentary seats. Fascists narrowly received the necessary 25%, in part due to violence and intimidation. As a result, leftists walked out in protest in an event known as the Aventine Succession.
In 1929, fascists signed the Lateran Treaty, which provided fascists with Catholic Church support in return for reimbursement for church lands seized decades ago by the government. Church corruption persisted beyond Luther. The church literally sold its soul to the devil. After the treaty was signed, Mussolini claimed that the church had threatened to excommunicate him if he did not agree. Far from becoming a medium of extended democracy, Parliament became, by law, an exclusively fascist-picked body in 1929. Mussolini grew increasingly anti-clerical and frequently decried the papacy during the 1930s. Fascists in Germany, the Nazi Party, attempted to emulate the Italian fascist movement, but the Nazis failed to seize power during their March on Berlin.
Conditions were favorable for the growth of the Nazi Party. The Great Depression was in full swing. As a result, popular opinion was against the government, and as Chancellor, Hitler was sufficiently able to take full advantage of that by starting programs similar to Roosevelt's New Deal. He successfully lowered the unemployment rate, which made him popular. In 1921, he became the leader of the Nazi Party. He set out to create a mass movement whose mystique and power would be sufficient to bind the party's members' loyalty to him. He engaged in unrelenting propaganda through the party newspaper, The Popular Observer, acquired in 1920, and through meetings whose audiences soon grew from a handful to thousands. With his charismatic personality and dynamic leadership, he attracted a devoted cadre of Nazi leaders, men whose names today live in infamy. The climax of this rapid growth of the Nazi Party in Bavaria came in an attempt to seize power in the Munich Putsch of November 1923, when Hitler and General Erich Ludendorff tried to take advantage of the prevailing confusion and opposition to the Weimar Republic to force the leaders of the Bavarian government and the local army commander to proclaim a national revolution. In the melee that resulted, the police and the army fired at the advancing marchers, killing a few of them. Hitler was injured and 4 policemen were killed. The government of Nazi Germany was a fascist totalitarian state. Totalitarian regimes, in contrast to a dictatorship, established complete political, social, and cultural control over their subjects and are usually headed by a charismatic and recognizable leader. Nazism's ideology included a racial theory, which denigrated non-Aryans, which was ironic due to Hitler's decidedly not blonde hair. Extreme nationalism, which called for the unification of all German-speaking people, the use of private paramilitary organizations, the SS, to stifle dissent and terrorize opposition, and the centralization of decision-making by a single leader. The German economic system remained capitalistic, but the state played a more prominent role in managing the economy. Industrialists were sometimes told what to produce and what price they should charge for the goods that they made. Hitler was deeply influenced by Mussolini's Italy, and his Nazi Germany shared many of the same characteristics. In Nazi Germany, most potential sources of opposition were removed. This included political parties and the trade union movement. In 1934, Hitler signed an agreement with Pope Pius XI in which he promised not to interfere in religion if the Catholic Church agreed not to become involved in politics in Germany, another clear example of church corruption. Individuals had no freedom to protest to Nazi Germany. All political organizations were either banned or under the control of the Nazis. Except for the occasional referendum, all elections, local and national, were abolished. Mussolini and Hitler supported the reign of other fascist leaders, including Francisco Franco of Spain. The general and dictator, Francisco Franco, ruled over Spain from 1939 until his death. He rose to power during the bloody Spanish Civil War, when, with the help of Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, his nationalist forces overthrew the democratically elected Second Republic, adopting the title of El Caudillo, the leader. Franco persecuted political opponents, repressed the culture and language of Spain's Basque and Catalan regions, censored the media, and otherwise exerted absolute control over the country.
Profe. Sí. ¿En inglés? No.
Are you tired of coming up with creative, controversial tweets that upset half the country?
Yes.
Does your mom take away your phone at 8 p.m. to prevent you from tweeting?
Yeah.
Are you tired of typing on that damn phone?
Yes.
Well, I have the solution for you. Introducing the Bitter Twitter Machine. Enjoy all your favorite activities without hassle. Our app types your tweets for you.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, more commonly known as North Korea, began in 1945 after World War II, when the Soviet Union and the United States divided Korea into two parts. North Korea tried to invade in 1950, which started the Korean War, one of the first wars by proxy between the US and the USSR. The Korean War did not change the geographic area of either country, but over 2.5 million civilians were either killed or wounded.
The reigns of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un have turned North Korea into a famine-ridden authoritarian state that flouts United Nations sanctions on nuclear weapons. However, North Korea remains a socialist state. Governmental programs provide for healthcare and other services, and the Supreme People's Assembly, similar to Congress, whose members are voted on by the entire population every 5 years. Despite having many fascist characteristics, including concentration camps for dissenters, a supreme leader viewed as superhuman, intense propaganda, and highly regulated employment and travel restrictions, North Korea was founded on a revolutionary socialist basis and retains many characteristics of socialism.
Many isolated neo-fascist and neo-Nazi movements have surfaced since World War II. However, no completely fascist regimes have exerted as much influence as the Axis powers. Neo-fascism is often used to describe today's far-right political figures and movements. For example, Trump and Marine Le Pen, who often advocate xenophobic policies and frequently decree any form of liberalism. The Antifa movement, Antifa being an abbreviation of anti-fascist, is a conglomeration of far-left ideologies that believe in direct action, such as protesting and sometimes militantism. In fact, many Antifa protests are held right here today at Westlake Center. Given that fascism was clearly a response to the conditions of the 20s and 30s, it's surprising that it has any purchase today. But bona fide fascism still lurks in the shadows. This group of people are unafraid to be labeled fascist and might even use the Nazi swastika. They're among the people who marched in Charlottesville, Virginia on August 12, 2017, a march that ended in the death of a counter-protester. They might join violent organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan, an anti-non-white, straight, male, cisgender group in the United States, or join fringe parties such as the British National Party. The electable fascism of the future won't look exactly like the fascism of the past, but it will always be tied to its horrifying memory. What about fascism within our own nation's leaders? Mussolini was a proponent of corporatism, defined by some as a merger of state and corporate power. And through that lens, using that term, Trump has displayed some fascist behavior as he spouts populist themes but manipulates people and institutions to achieve the opposite. All fascist leaders pretend to be on the side of ordinary working people, paying lip service to democracy and the common welfare, but at the same time, distrust democracy because it stands for equal opportunity. They invariably put money and power ahead of human beings. They demand free enterprise, but are the spokesman for monopoly and vested interest. They also claim to be super patriots, but they would destroy every liberty guaranteed by the Constitution. They talk about putting America first, but it's just a cover. They use isolationism as a slogan to conceal their own selfish imperialism. They poison the channels of public information. Their problem is never how best to present the truth to the public, but how best to use the news to deceive the public into giving them more money or power. There is a great difference between American fascists and other countries' murderous authoritarians. The American breed doesn't need violence. Lying to the people is so much easier. Thus, lying about unprecedented high crime rates legitimize a police state. Lying about immigrants being rapists and terrorists might justify a huge border wall, mass expulsions, and religion-based immigration bans. Lying about millions of illegal votes might excuse suppression of voting by disfavored groups. And what is the ultimate goal? Their final objective, toward which all their deceit is directed to capture political power, so that using the power of the state and the power of the market simultaneously, they may keep the common man in eternal subjection. Nationalism will persist until our society is completely globalized, which will come in the far future, if at all. While organized fascism may never return, it will always exist in the shadows as an escape for life's failures.
Money in the pile. Once you get a little, they just wanna take you down, cuz. I got the money in the pile. Once you get a little, they just wanna take you down, cuz.
Oh, it is my time for a little bit of hot dog.
What happened to this?
It's the new style. It's the new trend. I'm a trendy Italian.
Ellie, stop shaking your head.
Ellie!
Hannah, you're gonna fall.
I have learned to sword fight by the man himself.
Joe, wake up.
Dog.
Dude, I just slammed so hard on this thing.
I believe I can fly.
Employees in 1925.
No.
Huh?
What?
They'll enjoy watching Chris get
We're
shot.
enjoying watching you get shot too. It doesn't hurt. It's funnier when Ellie gets shot.
Yeah, exactly. I just took
I don't know the context, but it just is. Yeah, exactly.
Goodbye forever. Goodbye, Grady.
trash can.
Oh!
Ooh. And he's on varsity, folks.
Stop that!
Oh god.
Hello, Taco.
Yeah.
Hello, Jaja.
Oh, that's dumb.
That's absolutely disgusting. I will not allow for this.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
What is he trying to do?
You want to get a trash can ready?
Yeah, probably.
Is he gonna throw up?
Oh no! Oh my god! Why?
Ellie, how are you feeling? Making me come to a mock meeting right now. Are you feeling great about yourself? Because I'm feeling horrible.
Put it out.
I love Thomas, how are you doing? Stop! Stop vaping!
Sorry, I feel like a burp's going on.
That's a blooper now.